Well, suffer and succotash. It's the S list.
Yep.
All right. What's up, everybody? I'm Mike.
I'm Nick.
We are the Brothers Murph, and yes, it's time to talk about S games, baby.
That's right, S-tier games.
S tier. Well, I mean, these are all S tier.
They are S-tier games. Yeah,
dang sure.
So we're going through our alphabet series. We're getting close to the end, especially because some of these later letters we're gonna have to bunch together.
There'll be a couple of bunches.
So only a couple more. It's been a journey. Thank you so much for going on this journey. If you've been
so
the whole
fun
time, it's been really fun. So that's right. We're gonna talk about our favorite games. To start with the letter S. We've done all the letters before, so make sure to watch those videos as well. So let's get right into it. Our number 10 is going to be, in our opinion, the best of a series of games based around sushi by that praise be Phil Walker Hardin. This is going to be Sushi Roll specifically. Love the Sushi Go extended universe, we'll say. Sushi Go Party, Sushi Roll. There's like a Sushi Dim Sum one that came out this year. So I can't remember the exact call, but it had some fun name. It was got these big squishy dim sums. There's a whole bunch of these Sushi Roll games, Sushi Go games rather, and they're very good, but Sushi Roll is by far our favorite. It takes the kind of Sushi Go-ness where you're drafting these sushi cards, trying to make sets. So you might want, like, if you have one tempura, it's worth 2 points, but if you have two tempura, it's worth 8 points. Set collection through drafting. That's what you're doing in the game. You have a hand of cards, you keep one card, you pass your cards over. The problem with drafting games, particularly with drafting games that are kind of marketed as gateway games, drafting for whatever reason is difficult for new people to wrap their heads around. And a lot of times the drafting goes awry because people are drafting quicker than other people. So people are like grabbing it, boom, and then moving it over, and it just gets confusing. Sushi Roll is similar, but now you're drafting dice, and you're gonna be rolling out these dice, and then you're putting them on a conveyor belt, and the conveyor belts are then going to move to each person. So you're gonna place one, and it's the same thing. You're doing set collection, you want certain things. You can re-roll dice with like chopsticks and menu tokens. You can swap dice with other people, things like that. So there's a little bit more going on, but it makes the drafting portion of it way easier, because you can't just draft at your own speed. You have to like draft, and everyone will move their conveyor belts to the next person. So it just makes that part go over smoother, but then the kind of set collection is there. And there's not as much variety as there is in Sushi Go, especially Sushi Go Party. There's a ton of different cards. There's not as much variety, but again, if you're playing this with mostly new people, in my opinion, you don't really need that variety. The dice are really nice. It's still got that cool art, and it just makes the whole thing easier. And so Sushi Rolls are number 10 because it just goes down smooth, and I really like it.
Number 9 is Suburbia. This is a tile placement game where you are building your own little city, and you are trying to ultimately gain as much population as possible. You want as many people to move to your city, more so than anyone else's, and you're managing kind of the income and the money coming into your city and the expenses as your city grows, and kind of dealing with the fact that maybe as your city gets too big, it's a little less appealing than it once was naturally, because this is a big city to navigate now, so you have to kind of keep reinvesting in things to make as a high appeal, which brings people into your city, and making sure to manage your money as the city kind of budget balloons with more amenities. This is a really great, this was kind of our first example of a tile placement game that's all about adjacency, because there's going to be different types of buildings. There's going to be industries and kind of commercial buildings, residential, and many of the buildings want to be surrounded by other types of, either amenities or housing and things like that. And you're gonna kind of try to make as kind of synergistic stuff as possible. It's like one thing that might be really useful is like a big old parking lot, and you're gonna get points if you earn income and stuff if you surround it with commercial buildings. That's kind of making your commercial districts easier for people to get to work, build a freeway and stuff. You want around all your commercial stuff. You need like a slaughterhouse and farms to help provide food for all of your restaurants and stuff. But you don't necessarily want to put a house right next to that. It's a little grim. That might hurt your reputation and stuff as you go. So this is one that's been really fun to explore, kind of the synergies of the symbology on the tiles, and one that we've started playing pretty early in our board gaming career, and has always been satisfying ever since. That's Suburbia.
Number 8 is a reimplementation of a game called Mombasa that is called Skymines. We really like Skymines. It's really cool. Now you are kind of like corporations. Well, you're not really a corporation. There are different corporations that are mining the moon, our moon, and for various, stuff, rocks, I don't know what they're doing, but nonetheless they're mining stuff, these various corporations, and you are going to be buying stocks in those corporations and then putting out their buildings. The more buildings they have out there and the more stock you have, the more points it's going to be worth. And it's really, really fun, but this kind of like Mombasa has a really interesting kind of like deck building situation where you're gonna be playing out these cards, and then the cards you play are gonna be going into various different discard piles. And the various different discard piles obviously will have the different cards in them. At the end of your turn, you get to take one of the discard piles and then bring it back into your hand. And that is a really interesting thing, because when you're playing out these cards, they're going to have to go to different discard piles. You can't like really stack them all into one. And so you can kind of, it's kind of like you're building this like card engine, but then constantly having to like rip it apart again. Because again, you're like, oh, I got all these cards together, and now I have all this one turn where I can do all these very similar actions, but then you have to then split those cards up to those various discard piles. And again, when you're taking the discard piles, you only get one of them. And so it's this thing where you kind of like working towards a big turn, and then it kind of gets destroyed because you have to separate them. And then you have to kind of work it again into a big turn, and then it kind of gets destroyed again. It's this really interesting back and forth with your own kind of deck building. It's very, very cool. And I just really like it. I like the look of it. There's like two different sides of the board now. There's a couple different like modules you can play with it. It's just really, really cool, and I really enjoy it. And it takes the really cool mechanics of Mombasa and rethemes it and stuff like that, which is also great. And I just really, really enjoy it. And I like Skymines a lot, and it's a game that we want to explore more. We played it a bunch when it first came out, but it's been a little while since we've played it. But as we were making this list, we're like, man, we got to get Skymines back to the table because it's really, really good.
Next up is Sankore, the Pride of Mansa Musa, and this is a game where you are running a university in Timbuktu, and you are kind of advancing in these different disciplines of mathematics and theology and law way back when, kind of these early pursuits toward knowledge what we kind of use today in modern times. So you are going to be kind of investing students and stuff into your player board and moving them up, which is going to be representing them taking classes and advancing their skill set. And the more you kind of advance in and focus on like one or two of the disciplines, you're going to start taking stronger and stronger actions within that. So if I really invest on theology and getting books and things like that, I can really kind of take the most powerful versions of those actions. The thing that's really kind of interesting is you are at the end of the game going to get victory points for the disciplines that you have gained these kind of knowledge tokens in, but the value of those knowledge tokens is not set at the start of the game. In fact, nothing is worth anything, and as you're playing the game, there's going to be times where you're acquiring and then spending books. Anytime you're spending books, you're going to put them into this library board, and at the end of the game, you're going to kind of take a look at the different shelves, and whatever discipline of book, whether it be mathematics or whatever, is going to increase the value of those tokens for everybody throughout the game. So if you know you're doing a bunch of law, you're going to want to make sure that those are valuable tokens for you at the end of the game, or else, you're going to kind of nerf your score. So there's a really kind of interesting kind of thing that happens with this where I see that you're making this really valuable. Maybe I'm going to start investing in that area as well, so I can kind of gain some of that benefit, alongside what you've kind of the path you've laid. And I think it kind of reinforces the themes of like, we're all working at this university. Maybe we have different goals, but we are all gaining knowledge and we're all benefiting from the kind of collective investment in these, these pursuits of knowledges and stuff, and this kind of in teaching. And I think it's a really cool theme the way it comes through. It's a big chunky game, but I love the fact that you can manipulate what is valuable at the end of the game and hopefully turn it into something that you invested in.
Number 6 is a classic at this point, and this is Stone Age. Stone Age is widely considered generally to be one of the better intro worker placement games. Worker placement tends to be kind of a more advanced mechanic. It's hard to teach worker placement to brand new gamers because there's a lot to think about with worker placement, where you take a worker, you place it out there, but like where it goes, blocking each other, there's a lot going on. And Stone Age is a pretty simple worker placement game. You are in the Stone Age and you are trying to essentially build up your community. And you're doing that by getting, buildings and things like that. It has a little bit of set collection. You can go make more workers. You can work on your agriculture, which is always my favorite thing, because feeding your people in this game is a whole thing. You need to feed your people every turn, but as you develop agriculture, you're kind of getting this passive food income every time, and it makes feeding your people easier. And one thing I like about Stone Age, and Mike particularly talks about a lot with Stone Age, is it tells this really interesting thematic tale where in the very beginning of the game, feeding your people, unless you're doing like starvation strats, which sound bananas to me, but I know people do starvation strats, but feeding your people takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of your time. But as the game goes on and you get these various tools, when you increase your agriculture, all these different things, feeding your people gets easier and easier. And so now you can have those people go off and do other things. And it kind of shows how civilization actually worked, where it's like, when we're back in like hunter-gatherer societies, it's like, that's pretty much what you were doing all day, every day, because the only goal was just like, we need to feed ourselves, that's it. But then as we start getting agriculture and these things, start cooking our food, all these things, we now have a little bit more leisure time, which means we can now start doing these other things. That's kind of how evolution works, right? And so it's really, really interesting to kind of see that in a game. It's very, very cool. It's got this kind of risk reward part of it too, where when you want to go, say, get wood or stone or gold, you can put as many workers there as you want for the most part. And then basically every worker you put there, you get to roll that many die. And then you're basically going to take the value of your dice and then divide it by a certain number depending on what resource you're trying to get, and that's how many you get. So I think wood is 3. So basically, if I go there with 1 worker and I roll a 3, I'm going to get 1 wood. If I roll a 6, I'll get 2 wood. So you kind of want to stack those decks. You're like, okay, I really, really need wood, so I'm going to put 4 workers, so I get to roll 4 dice. Hopefully I'm going to get a ton of wood. But sometimes you kind of don't. And you have to kind of deal with that. And it's just really, really, again, it kind of works that thematic stuff where it's like, hey man, sometimes you go pan for gold, you don't find nothing. It's got these really interesting thematic ties, and it's just a more simple worker placement game that just works. It's a classic for a reason, and it's a banger.
Number 5 is a classic we played a bajillion times. This is Space Base. This is a dice rolling game. We're going to roll dice and then activate sectors of ships as you kind of build up this engine to generate ultimately victory points. But you can also generate income for yourself and money to spend to buy better cards. So the thing that's kind of fun is when you roll your dice, you have 12 sectors of ships that are numbered 1 through 12. And when you roll your dice, you can either use both dice individually. So if I had like a 3 and a 4, I could activate sector 3 and sector 4. I could combine them to activate sector 7. And typically the higher numbers are going to be more valuable, but of course they are harder to roll and you have to use both dice, but you can get a better hit. And as you buy ships, you are going to get rid of the old ship and tuck it underneath your board. And that's going to then become something that activates when that number is rolled on one of your opponent's turns. And that's just something that we've really enjoyed for all these years, the fact that you're always gaining things in this game. You're always engaged in what's happening because there's so many things that can happen while it's not even your turn. You can really try to set yourself up well so that you're always getting something. If I have, numbers 1 through 6 have at least one thing deployed, well, I'm always going to activate at least something on my turn. Or do I try to really invest in one number so that maybe it doesn't hit as often, but when it does, it's really big for me? There's all these different ways to do this as you kind of ramp up quickly and generate all these points for yourself. So that kind of race element of seeing, oh, this person's getting cooking, I got to start switching to generating points instead of just money. Buying those like level 2 and level 3 cards are really kind of fun. So it's just always has a satisfying kind of ramp up effect. There's of course expansions and various things to kind of extend, the interest level in this game, and just keeps it coming back really. So that's Space Base.
Number 4 is going to be Spirit Island. This would probably be a lot of people's favorite S game, or really just favorite game. People love Spirit Island, and Spirit Island is great. We're now finally starting to get into Spirit Island. We first played Spirit Island the first couple times. It was probably a little too heavy for us, and I didn't really like the game that much, but I've been playing it more recently, and I'm like, oh yeah, no, I get it. I get why people like this game so much. This is a lifestyle game for a lot of different people. This is a game where it's got a really cool theme where I wish more games would take this approach, which is kind of showing the other side of the coin of a situation. So in this case, you are spirits of this island, and you are trying to protect the local inhabitants of that island, and there are invaders, essentially like colonists, coming in to the island, and you are trying to fend them off. You're trying to scare them, you're trying to get their blight off of the land, and it's kind of that other side of the coin. Usually you're the people coming onto an island and then taking resources, all that kind of stuff. In this situation, you're trying to combat that off, and it's kind of a cool way to see the other side of that coin, and I kind of wish more games would be like, hey, here's this kind of theme that we all know, and let's show the other side of this. And that could really be anything, but I just think it's a really cool theme. But this is a game where all of the spirits in this game, there's a whole bunch of them now with all these expansions, they are all very, very different. They all work differently, they all play differently. There are people who are like, I've played this game 100 times and I still feel like I'm barely scratching the surface. It's just really, really cool, because this is one of those games where you have to learn the characters, you have to learn the spirits, figure out how they work, and then once you kind of figure it out, you can then dive deeper and deeper and deeper and play them over and over and over again and get the nuances and get new ways to kind of work certain things. It's just very, very cool. But again, you are trying to kick out these invaders. They can start off as like, the actual people. They then build like towns. Those towns can build into cities. Those things get harder and harder to get rid of. But then as you can instill more fear in them, it gets easier and easier to get rid of those things because they're getting scared by the spirits on the island. It's just very, very cool. The art is cool. The world is cool. It's got a great theme. And I just really, really like it. I'm finally starting to get into it. And that's been awesome because I'm like, oh, now I get it.
Next up is Space Station Phoenix. This is a game where you are each building this kind of big space station and you are housing different alien races and humans alike in these kind of different modules of your space station, and really building out kind of a really asymmetric kind of engine for generating points and things for yourself as you go. This is one that we've really enjoyed exploring because at the beginning of the game you have kind of your central little hub, and all of ours are going to be a little bit different. So we might have a slightly different end game scoring situation or a slightly bit of different kind of income. And from there, you're going to start building out these sort of 3 tiers of your space station. And each of those are going to be unique to each other. So as you build more and more modules, you're going to have vastly different incomes when you take an income round. You're going to have vastly different ways you can kind of manipulate and make things valuable for yourself. Maybe it's certain types of aliens versus certain other types, and all sorts of stuff like that. So this really comes down to kind of what build do you want to make? What kind of direction am I going to lean in, starting with that asymmetric kind of starting point, and then all the different, hundreds of ways you could branch out from there as you build a space station. Things that we really like about this is the actions are really simple. There's kind of like collecting resource action. There's going to be a building action for parts of your space station and things like that. But as you go and build these kind of bigger sections of space station, one thing that's really rare is like this kind of, the metal to make your biggest kind of pieces, which are really, really expensive. So one thing you can actually do, all of your worker spaces are ships, and you can disassemble a ship and kind of harvest it for its metal and recycle it to build a new thing. So you're kind of, gaining and losing the ability to place workers out onto spaces as you go. And you can even use your opponent's spaces like that. So it's a really kind of interesting thing of like, I'm going to disassemble this thing, my fleet of action spaces, so I can assemble these kind of bigger pieces of my space station to generate those points and income and stuff like that. It's really interesting. It's really kind of got this almost semi-closed economy of these crystals that you use to take your actions and pay to your opponents if you're making use of one of their ships. There's a lot of really, really cool stuff. And again, every time you play the game, it's going to be slightly different. You're going to have a slightly different array of worker spots, I should say, those ships. You're going to have a slightly different starting hub, and then there's a million ways to build this, so it kind of keeps you coming back.
Number 2 is the most recent Spiel des Jahres winner, and this is Skyteam. I really like Skyteam. Scorpion Masque, who's the publisher who makes Skyteam, is really they've been doing stuff outside of the box for a while. It's not necessarily a new thing with like things like Decrypto, things like Turing Machine, Skyteam. They think outside the box at Scorpion Masque, and I really, really appreciate it. This is a 2-player co-op game where you are trying to land a plane. You're trying to land a plane at a very normal airport like Heathrow in London, or I think JFK in or maybe LaGuardia, but nonetheless, very normal airports and you are trying to land this plane. So you have a co-pilot and a pilot, and you have different sides of the board that you can put your dice on, and you basically, on your turn, you're going to kind of, or rather during the round, you're going to kind of discuss what you want to try and do, and then silence happens and you roll your dice behind your screen, and then one by one you're going to place your dice out onto the board. And there's a number of different places you can place it. Some people, some spots, multiple people can place it, or some spots are only for the pilot or only for the co-pilot. There is like your engine where you are determining how fast you're coming in. There is the tilt of your plane. There is, you need to be opening the flaps and engaging the brakes and getting things ready for this land. There are maybe other planes in the way, and you have to shoot them down. And by that, I mean you radio control them and be like, hey, can you freaking move? You know, that kind of stuff. And so you have to get the other planes out of the way so that you can actually land. There's all these things. And again, you have this discussion of what you want to do, and then you roll your dice and you're kind of like, okay, now I have these dice and now I have to place them out in a way that's kind of not going to damage things. You need to make sure, again, because if you tilt too much, you immediately lose. If you overshoot your destination, you lose. There's a lot of different ways you can lose in the game. And so you're trying to just land this plane safely. And it's tougher than you think, because again, you roll these dice, you kind of have to deal with it like that. You're kind of doing that, like not talking, but trying to communicate with each other. Like, okay, if I put a 4 here, you need to put a 2 there, or something like that. You're like, I need you to do this. You're kind of trying to communicate like telepathically. It's just really, really fun. And then on top of that, in the box, there's all these different airports that you can go into. And a lot of the different airports will have different things. So like London Heathrow is a very, very busy airport, which it is in real life. So there's way, way, way more planes that you have to get rid of because it's a very busy airport. There's like certain ones where you can have like kerosene leaks. You can have like an intern you have to deal with. There's other times where you have to like tilt really, really hard and then come back because you're going through like a mountain. They have all these different scenarios you can do, and it's really, really cool. But it comes down to that just like really fun co-op nature. It's just this cool, again, it's just different. It's just built different, and it's really, really fun. And I love Sky Team.
Number 1 is Slay the Spire. This is a new one to us, but one that we really, really enjoy. This is a cooperative implementation of the video game Slay the Spire, now turned into a board game that you can play multiplayer and again play cooperatively together. And that's for us what really is exciting. Is it keeps all the flavor, all of the heart of Slay the Spire, which is a deck building roguelike, and it puts it into a board game form. And everything that we loved about the video game, which we've both invested several hours into, we see implemented right here. So the cards are the same, the characters have the same flavors and stuff, but they've simplified and streamlined some of the math because you don't have some, machine keeping book for you, so you have to make it a little bit easier to do, but they did that really in a slick way. And one thing that's different from the video game is this is now multiplayer and cooperative, and there's no specific turn structure. So people can play one card, and then their teammate can play a card right after and maybe make use of a debuff or something that they put onto one of the bad guys that you're fighting. And that feels truly cooperative. Like, okay, I'm gonna play this, you're gonna play that card, then I'm gonna play my card, and you really create a cool combination from the different blends of different characters and their particular play styles, because each character is pretty different from the other ones. I think that's a really, really neat thing. I just think it's kind of a cool trick that they took a video game that's kind of like a board game and made it into a really good board game, and also made it different from the video game and provide a way to play it that you can't play it in the video game form. I think that's pretty cool that they managed to do that, and I think they did it really well. And for a co-op game, it feels truly cooperative and dynamic because there's not those really specific turn structures, and we can all work together to try to figure out how do we play these, this collection of 3 characters or whatever it might be, how do we play their cards as synergistically as possible to pull off a huge turn.
So that was our favorite game.
Superfluous S games.
There's a lot of S games.
Some serendipitous S games.
Some
simple S games?
Sauerkraut?
Sauerkraut S games is what we just talked about, everybody. In the comments, please put your favorite games to start with the letter S. Can be any theme, any mechanism. Get those S games in the comments below. As you said, they're S tier. Hopefully they're S tier for you. We want to know what you enjoyed. Thanks very much for continuing on with us through the alphabet, and keep it going, and we'll catch y'all in the next top 10.